Good evening. I heard several of the folks who were here tonight said this is worse than a job. Thank you for volunteering your time and your talent. And I wanted to ask, who is here tonight for the first time? Raise your hand. So we have some here for the first time. How many of y'all have been here at least 2 times? And 3 times? Okay. We'd like to, on behalf of the mayor and council, again, welcome you to the Civic Center to participate in the property visioning process for the 467-acre that was formerly known, I guess is known as the Johnson Farm. The purpose of this public engagement process is to give our citizens an opportunity to shape the design and development of the 467-acre property between Guilford College Road and Mackey Road. And we have had as our host tonight, the town has hired Seth Harry and Associates, and they're a firm from Frederick, Maryland, who has somewhat of a national reputation for looking at large sites and doing just what we're doing. And Seth Harry and Associates and their team were hired to be advocates for the town and for the citizens. We wanted to provide some professionals to lead our public engagement process and leave us with a design with input from the citizens. And we've learned, we've sort of been hooked up to a fire hose. We've learned a lot about development and how it takes place. And Seth is an independent third-party contractor. He was hired to do this process with no, we have a contract with him, but he is not doing what the town council wants. He's not doing what perhaps individual citizens would want, but he's trying to achieve a consensus from this particular group over this period of time. And then when we come up with what it is that seems to be the consensus on how this property is going to be developed, then we will work with, we have a new owner, we have a new developer, and we will have a new project. And so it's going to be something different than perhaps what we had. And at this point, I wanted to, and the purpose of this exercise is when we get down to the end of this time period, we will come up with a development agreement, and we will reach agreement between the town council, the town, and the developer to ensure that the things that we have come up with here tonight, are included in the development agreement. So there is some accountability that's going to be built into this process to make sure that the things that we think are most important, to the extent possible, are included in the plan. And we've been working and building with our open loop process. The first night we came in and we looked at preferences of things we wanted and things we didn't want, and some things were very clear. One of the items I noted was assisted living, and I don't think it had 1 dot. So we took that to mean that we didn't want assisted living type project here. And then we did find some things that people liked, green space, open space, connectivity, neighborhood feel, and so those different items were built into the process. And last night we looked at the overall plan of the area, and now we're going to, I'll introduce Seth Harry, and he will go through the results of last night and lead us a little bit further. And so let's give a Jamestown welcome for Seth.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you all. Good to see you all again, and good evening, and thank you for coming. I just wanted to clarify a little bit one of Dave's statement. When he said Seth Harry and Associates, most of the team is not Seth Harry and Associates. These are independent consultants who we've worked with collaboratively for many, many, many years, but they have their own firms, they're architects, they're also town planners in their own right, landscape architects, landscape designers, engineers, et cetera. So it's me and a very helpful group of people. Tonight actually, it's a little less hectic than last night, thankfully. With each passing day, we're sort of getting back out in front of the process a little bit and some of the technical issues. And also, we've been working at trying to resolve some of the confusion over the last few days. We're trying to cover a tremendous amount of ground in a relatively short period of time on a relatively large and complex site. And we understand there's been some confusion regarding some of the meaning of some of the, for instance, the colors on the plans, all of which was, of course, not intentional, but in the haste to color the plans the other day, we ended up with a couple different colors on a couple different plans. So we've been working on two things today. One is consolidating the two plans from yesterday, taking what we interpreted to be the best of both plans based on the input that we heard from you, and create a combined plan, which is now down here, which we're going to be talking about tonight, and also incorporating, again, additional refinements and modifications based on the feedback that we're continuing to get from the community. We're also starting to refine the plan relative to specific issues and features of the site, specifically topography, again, all of the constraints and parameters with regarding to stream buffers, wetlands, et cetera. So the plans are not only being refined in terms of community input, but they're also being refined in terms of technical and regulatory parameters. And in the process of that, we're looking for opportunities to make the plan better. Oh, sorry, is that better? Okay, thank you. And thank you for, please let me know every time. So it's an ongoing process. It's an evolution, it's a refinement, et cetera. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Keith. And we'll continue to do this with feedback from tonight. And I should also mention that we will be again accepting and soliciting feedback on the final presentation, because there's still a lot of work to do even when we're finished with this process. But the intent is to make the plan as accurate, as feasible from a technical point of view, from a market point of view, and from the community's perspective. And so that's the work that we've been doing today. The other thing that we've been working on specifically is to bring some more clarity to some of the issues of confusion over the last couple days. That's being done through a variety of means. One is, again, we're getting a consistent palette for the colors. Now that we only have one plan, that's a little bit easier. The other thing is we're starting to kind of add additional detail information, which hopefully will bring more clarity to your understanding of what it is how we're translating your input into a physical plan. So in spite of the somewhat hectic last-minute setup for yesterday's presentation, we were able to get a questionnaire out, which we actually got a tremendous amount of additional information from, which I appreciate very much your help in that. We spent the afternoon collating that, and we'll add that and talk about that in a few minutes. But there does seem to be a very consistent trend emerging in terms of community feedback, and this is why we sort of always kind of go back through the last 2 days as a starting point for talking about the next plan. Excuse me. So just a very brief summary of how we got to where we are here tonight. So the opening night survey results, this is we went through all of them yesterday, but just again a quick reminder. There was actually a fair amount of consistency on a number of specific issues in terms of preferences. These are just 4 of the 13 questions that were asked, but just a quick reminder, and all of this is available online if anybody wants to go back and review it. We talked about the input on on the questionnaire, the 3 questions, what the residents would most like to see and least like to see. These are the top 5, and then I also read through the full list last night. Oh, let me talk about this real quick, just a second. Park, recreation, green space, that was the top of the list of most like to see. School, civic amenity, that's still in the plan, and we're still talking about both what that means and where to locate it in the plan. And that, I don't know if we made that, did we make that a question for tonight? Where to locate the school? I don't know if we can add that. Well, I'll just ask, and then, hopefully we can incorporate that even if it doesn't make it on the survey. We have some thoughts. We can certainly make some suggestions. Trees and buffers, variety of housing types, small community-oriented retail, and then the things least like to see, cookie cutter, low quality, no trees, apartments, and there was a whole litany of other things there that we don't need to repeat. So this was the first night's pinups. This was the comments from last night. And I was really surprised and impressed with the amount of input that we got. We did ask for your preferences of the 3 plan options that you saw last night. It seemed like a pretty even split between Plan A and B, which are the 2 plans here. I'm sorry, A and C, that's a mistake. This was A and this was C. And so those were the 2 plans that we consolidated into the plan that you're seeing tonight. Out of all of the respondents, I forgot how many we had, I think it was about 27 people, 80% of the respondents responded positively to one or the other of those 2 plans combined. And what did you most like? These were the main topics in which the responses. So some were, it was in terms of the frequency of the comment, some were positive, some were not positive in terms of the issues and concerns. But on the positive side, certainly green spaces, buffers, natural areas, that continues to be a very dominant theme. And we've continued to try to integrate that into the plan at every opportunity. Commercial, if we have it, keep it small. Connectivity, transportation, that was in the top 3 of the discussed topics. Pods and defined neighborhoods, I'm not exactly sure what the specific context was, but I think there was some discussion about the differences between the 2 and, again, the pros and cons on that point, but it was another topic of discussion. Recreation and park spaces. And when we talk about the school and the civic site, or the site, school site, that might be, we haven't really talked about that larger recreational park of the combined small parks and larger parks, but it's possible that we could go ahead and reserve a school site in the plan that could be a recreational park in the short term as a civic use, and potentially a future school site as well with those same recreational facilities. And then apparently there was still some divided positions with regard to commercial, small-scale commercial or no commercial at all. We talked again about the final deliverables, first night in the opening presentation and consequent. And just while we're on this one, again, the issue of the colors were, in general, based on neighborhood structure, neighborhood center, neighborhood general, and neighborhood edge, with the darker color being the neighborhood center, which is, again, where most of the neighborhood amenities are, and the higher density housing, typically townhouses in this particular case, and a narrow lot, single-family detached. And then in the general, it would be more like a typical suburban, quarter acre or smaller lot with single-family detached house. And then the edge condition, which in this particular plan were those larger, more estate-sized lots on the perimeter of the neighborhoods, which typically back to nature in this particular plan. So we talked a little bit last night about the 2007 comp plan, which lays out a series of policy objectives for the community, and the fact that there was language in there at that time specifically referencing the site with a lot of the same ideas and concepts that have been discussed over the past few days. This was an image that you saw in the opening night presentation. I realized in looking at it again, not only did I come back last night and change that out with a Forestdale photo of what, for this community, for Jamestown, we thought a neighborhood edge condition represented from a housing type point of view. And we actually went out and we measured the lots, by the way, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But they measured roughly, typically about 100 feet wide by about 140 feet deep, which are about a third of an acre lot. So they're They're not huge, but they're nice-sized lots. But more importantly, as we talked about earlier on the first night, it allows the house to sit more comfortably on the lot, and it gives you the ability to have side-loaded, front access, but side-loaded garages. And there's some beautiful examples of it right down the street. And of course, those lots often back to nature as well, either a green buffer between the houses or along the periphery of the neighborhood. The other thing that might have been confusing in the color resolution on this, the other thing we did, so we added some additional small lot, single-family detached in the neighborhood general, and of course, what we had in the original, which is small neighborhood serving retail, and again, if we have any attached housing, it would be in the neighborhood center. We talked a little bit internally about what that neighborhood retail might look like, and it might just be, sort of literally, a neighborhood pizza place, something like that, a place to hang out for the residents of the community. So, and I changed the colors. We've been having some real issues with colors, both with our markers, but also with the resolution on the on this projector. But this was supposed to actually look like the colors on the plan graphic you just saw, and you can see obviously it's still not working because we used a different palette on that when we used this slide originally. So we tried to bring that up. So hopefully by the time we're done tonight, there'll be a lot less confusion about both the colors and what they represent. There was some discussion last night about sustainability, and it's not that we don't care about sustainability, it's just that it's such an integral part of everything we do. It wasn't a priority in terms of sort of talking about it last night because we just assumed, that was a given. But this was the study that I mentioned last night, which I did find on my computer, because I reference it often, particularly on our project in Southern Maryland, which is right on this Chesapeake Bay where water quality is a critical issue and concern. This was actually done by, I think, with a grant with Carolina Coastal Conservancy. Were you guys, any of you guys involved with this particular study? Okay, and some other colleagues of us. But they wanted to understand how community format affected impacts of water quality and in conjunction or association, things like we talked about air quality, impervious surfaces, those types of things from a sustainability point of view. So this was very much related to that issue, all of those issues of sustainability. So they took sort of a conventional single-use, suburban, large lot, single-family detached, community format, strip commercial along the highway frontage, and actually modeled it from a water quality point of view. And they compared that against a cluster development, compact cluster development, very similar to, again, that form of development that was referenced in the 2007 comprehensive plan. We call it just basically compact. This is the definition of a compact walkable community. So same net density in terms of unit counts, but in a much more compact form, and so same gross yield as that previous project. So you can see that not only do you have the smaller scale walkable box, et cetera, and we've been talking a little bit about what that means in terms of the quality of the streetscape and whatnot, but we didn't really talk a lot about that. And that's the huge and most immediate benefit of building in a more compact clustered format. And there's other benefits that aren't specific to that, but they are related. And one is, of course, is that if you're able to get your daily needs short, either within your neighborhood or a short drive away, versus driving to the big box shopping center 5 miles away, that's 5 miles of asphalt that didn't need to be there to support that trip. And there's also another parking lot at that big box retailer that didn't need to be there. So all of those things contribute to all of the issues regarding sustainability that we talked about last time. So this is a useful study because, again, it sort of kind of compares the two forms. This image talks a little bit about the quality of the neighborhoods. It's very similar to Forestdale down the street in terms of the feel and character of a neighborhood and the identity of the neighborhood. But this is the part that was most important. So they actually modeled the site as undisturbed, basically forest in its natural conditions, and measured the potential runoff, the sediment in tons, nitrogen pounds per acre, phosphorus, and the chemical oxygen demand. So these are all things that are critically important in an estuary habitat like the Chesapeake. And then they modeled the sprawl. That's the existing conditions. Sprawl, you can see there's obviously significant impacts from the development of that. This is ideal, obviously. But if you're going to develop it and you need the housing or the economic value of that development, this is the impacts in a conventional sprawl, large lot, single-family detached, single-use development. And then they modeled the equivalent impacts on the image, the plan option that you saw previously. And you can see there's still impacts relative to a natural condition, there's no question. But if you look at the relative impacts between the sprawl and the compact cluster development, it's pretty significant. When you look at sediment in tons, it's down almost 75%, 2/3 reduction, or a third reduction in runoff, and of course it's the water quality that's critically important. Again, a 75% reduction in nitrogen. What's that? That's about 60% reduction in phosphorus, and a chemical oxygen demand down by half. So obviously, the Carolina Coastal Conservancy thought this was important information to share because it's critical to the health of our planet and certainly our estuaries. We talked about, again, just the general characteristics that define walkable compact cluster development, neighborhood-based, walkable, connected, provides housing choice, range of housing types, price points, and mixed use. And we talked a little bit about probably one of the first large-scale primary home communities built based on these principles, which is Kentlands, which was actually, I think, broke ground in 1889, so it's over 30 years old now. And what the net density of that was, and it was 352 acres, and based on the number of units on the overall property, it netted out gross, I should say, the units per acre, about 4.5 units per acre, which is about a little under a quarter acre lot. Now, obviously, there's a lot of lots in Kentlands that are smaller than a quarter of an acre. But there's also a lot of lots in Kentlands that are larger than a quarter of an acre. But what you're doing with those smaller lots by building more compactly is you're buying things that you can't, basically that density or that compactness buys things that you wouldn't have in a conventional subdivision. And that's these lakes and walking trails. And another thing that it buys is this. This is the farm district at Kentlands, which was the original Kent Farm, which was the farm that turned into Kentlands, the community of Kentlands. And we spent a lot of time looking at the house, the existing house on the Johnson property, and we talked about the desire to preserve that or the need to preserve that and to integrate it in the plan because it's important. This, by the way, is the absolute gem of Kentlands. They have all kinds of continuing education programs, live performances, art shows, all kinds of things. And they built a small neighborhood around it, but it's called the Farm District, and it's a tremendous asset for the community. By the way, those were some of the farm ponds that were there, and they were retained and improved and enhanced both from a safety and from an environmental point of view. And then all the creeks and wetlands and so forth and stream buffers are all continuous walking trails throughout the community. So that's some of the things that those smaller lots buy, is the ability to be more selective in terms of where you reallocate that land within the community. By the way, we went back. This is a Google Earth image of Forestdale right down the street, and their average lot size is, again, 0.32 acres. So there's a lot of similarity between Forestdale, some of the edge conditions, neighborhood edge conditions, and Kentlands. And this is, again, a much denser neighborhood or more intensely developed neighborhood because of the market there than what is likely to be proposed for here. And so I think we have an opportunity to preserve a significant amount of the natural features of the site and also to incorporate designs like this into the plan. So this was Plan A and Plan C. Excuse me. From last night, you can see a lot of things we talked about. I'll try to do a little bit better job again of explaining the color palette. But the idea is that each one of these neighborhoods has sort of a hierarchy of conditions from the center to the general to the edge, and that they help give structure both to the neighborhoods, but they also allow for that diversity of housing types and price points within each of the neighborhoods. And it also, again, allows us to build a little bit more compactly, preserving a lot of the open space and natural habitat that you see here. We talked about incorporating buffers along the major highway frontages, the existing tree stands along the local roads here, provide continuity of habitat and wildlife corridors, et cetera. And then also to sort of allow interconnectivity within the neighborhoods based on the topography and features of the site. This was Plan A. You see a lot of the same general layout diagrammatically, because again, at the early stages when you're defining the buildable and developable areas and the places that need to be maintained in its natural state, you know, they look somewhat similar if you kind of squint at them, but each designer took a little bit different approach in terms of how they chose to lay out the streets and blocks in relationship to the topography and other features. I think one of the things that when we talked about the potential for retail, I think there was pretty broad consensus that that was a good location for it, but it needed to be small scale and neighborhood serving, which we also understood. I think so this is where we left last night, just about 24 hours ago. So we then went to, we spent the day consolidating the two plans. So in theory, if you squint at this, you sort of should see both plans together, but there's a couple of additional refinements. Unfortunately, the scanner here was having a bulb issue, so this is actually a cell phone photo of the plan. But we're still struggling a little bit with the marker colors, but if you see the actual plan over there, you can see that the structure of the neighborhood centers are consistent with both plans, how they laid on the site, minimize grading and impacts on steep slopes. Again, we haven't specifically defined where potential stormwater facilities might go, but we've left room we know where they would go, and we've left room for those. We just haven't shown them as such. But I'm going to overlay our original neighborhood diagram on this in a minute. And we still have the three colors, which unfortunately doesn't show very well here again, but it's neighborhood center, neighborhood general. Well, there's two neighborhood centers. There's the neighborhood centers within the fabric within the site, and then there's neighborhood centers with the potential for retail, and that is, so it's only allowed in the neighborhood center that has along these frontages that are indicated in the red frontage line there. The same stream crossings have been consistent throughout the development of the plan, and they were where they were indicated on the property owner's engineering plan, so they're consistent with that. We did add one new connection, which was not on the original plan, which is right here, and we do think there is a potential for that, so that this does not have to be an isolated partial neighborhood down here, and we're pretty confident that that's feasible. We still have a secondary right in and right out indicated here, which would almost be sort of a little bypass for residents to bypass the commercial area coming in from this side. We have the small greens that are capturing some of the existing tree stands and so forth. For instance, right here, there's a large tree stand which has been indicated as now a park. And when we redrew the plan, for instance, here, we realized that there was a pretty large draw up here into this area. So we basically took the idea of this and pulled that out so that it came up and engaged, see if I can get this to work, engaged that green that you saw in the other plan. And then this draw also came up here and engaged the green. So you're really getting this continuity here of green coming right through into and through the neighborhood. And of course, hopefully by Saturday, we'll have a trail network here as well too on the plan. We've tried to reduce or minimize or eliminate all roundabouts. And I saw this on the plan up here, and I said, I think that was Steve. I said, Steve, you know, that sure looks like a roundabout. He goes, no. He said, there's a specimen tree there, and this is celebrating the tree that was saved and making a feature of it. And I said, really? He said, well, there's lots of trees there. One of them's probably a specimen tree. But I just wanted to be clear, that wasn't a roundabout. That was supposed to be highlighting the idea of being able to bring trees into the neighborhood. The other thing too, by the way, which that doesn't show here, but on these edge conditions, there will be opportunities, just like out here at Forestdale, to save the mature trees on those sites. So it's not going to be a hard edge along those perimeters like the graphic shows. That's just basically showing where the lots would be. But the idea is that any existing forest stands would essentially sort of soften and migrate through into those edges. And this is the existing farmhouse, and Scott developed this detail, which was to sort of give it a formal green that again kind of attached this internal green right there, so that it had a very stately and appropriate presence again on Guilford College Road, probably consistent with what it had originally. And and we also noticed up here again there was some existing wetlands up here that needed to be preserved. One of the things that didn't show up, by the way, is this is in fact a large green here. It's a large draw, and we went ahead and left it open, but it wasn't colored on the plan. So there's a lot more refinement to the plan in terms of bringing that level of detail into the plan, and also a little more clarity in terms of where the neighborhood structure was. So this was the original neighborhood diagrams, neighborhood circles, the quarter-mile walking radius circles that I showed on the opening night presentation overlaid on this plan. So you can see that the integrity of the original neighborhood structure that was diagrammatically indicated when we identified the developable and the non-developable areas is still very much intact, and that the structure of the neighborhood center, neighborhood general, and neighborhood edge reflects that. Oh, wait. I thought there was something there, but there we go. Okay. This is a detail plan. I think one of the other things that there was some confusion about last night is because we're drawing at 1 inch equals 300 feet, which is a very large scale, and we're trying to lay out the block structure, the neighborhood structure. The understanding is, on our side, that all of these things represent specific, platted lots. But until we get to the final plan on Saturday, that won't necessarily be self-evident. So we went ahead and we did just very quickly, because this was literally in the last 20 minutes, is we did a illustrative platting of the neighborhood in the upper northwest corner, so you could sort of see these larger lot, 1/3 to 3/4 acre lots around the periphery. These are the neighborhood general lots, which would be probably a 1/4 acre or less. And then, of course, in the neighborhood center, this would be where you could either have narrow lot, single-family detached, or some townhouses. But you can see now the relationship between the neighborhood structure much more clearly, and the different house types and lot sizes that would be associated with those areas. So the idea is around the periphery and up to nature, that's where we have the larger lots. And along the green buffers here, along the neighborhood frontages and along the local road frontages. So I hope this brings a little bit more clarity to the issue of what the neighborhood center general and edge conditions represent, and then what it would actually look like in terms. And by the way, we're also working on renderings for all these things right now. And now that the plan is getting closer to a final, those will start appearing as well also. You can see here some of the indications of the creeks, creek buffers, neighborhood centers, and again, wherever we've had, there's a neighborhood center, we typically located those either on a high point or a place, again, where there's a standing timber so that we can incorporate the standing timber into those areas. This is that draw that is left open. So this should be green, but like this. But the idea is that back here, we're just going to, because it's very difficult to build, so we're just kind of leaving that as really literally as a window kind of into the neighborhood. And these houses would front on that, but step back, quite a ways from the street there. See what else we got here. Talk about. And again, obviously, places like this, they're developable in the sense that we can put these larger lot houses on it, but obviously it's a one-way in, one-way out. I shouldn't say one-way in. So instead of doing a cul-de-sac, we just basically do a close on those. A small, this could be, potentially, again, some smaller lot houses to take advantage of the amenity of that. And then we also have places for within the neighborhoods for neighborhood amenities, community pools, community centers, whatever. So, and a lot of the projects built like this typically have them on a neighborhood basis plus one large community center for the community as a whole. But for the size, I think it's possible there could be a couple. And we would identify sites for those in the plan very much like this. And that's kind of a detail right there of the existing farmhouse. And lastly, again, just to try to clarify a little bit about the confusion, probably should have done that over the detailed plan with the platting. But again, the color is pretty good on this. So this is showing on that northwest corner again, the neighborhood edge condition, where that would be in the plan. This is all of this area right here. Neighborhood general, which is the more general part of the plan, which had the most diversity and range of housing types and densities. And then the neighborhood center, which would be right here at the entrance, would also allow neighborhood scale commercial along those frontages. And I think that might be it. So that's what we've been working on today. And I believe we have another online question, and I think we also handed one out. So what our takeaway from this process so far is there's been tremendous consistency in the input and direction that we've been receiving from the community from day one. And while there's still some items out there for discussion, continued discussion, we think the things that we've been focusing on in terms of the development of the plan have been consistent with the preferences of the largest majority of the participants, and to the extent that there remains concerns about either some of the uses, proposed uses, or how the plan responds to other issues, those will remain on the table, and we'll continue to address those as best we can as we continue to move forward. But for the moment, we feel like we've been tracking pretty consistently in terms of the continued ongoing refinement of the plan based on the input that we've had from the community and what the surveys have indicated, again, consistently. And we'll continue to do that through the ongoing refinement and development of the plan. So I think that's it for now. Do you guys have anything you want to add, or then shall we open it up for some questions? Okay. So related to the presentation and the plan, obviously.
Two things that I wrote down. You mentioned eliminating all roundabouts. Now, without getting technical about the size of this thing, speed control in my neighborhood is a concern. And with your longer streets,
Right.
how are you thinking about speed control?
Well, I'm sorry. The question was, thank you for reminding me. The question was speed control. We're eliminating roundabouts. How do we intend to do that without roundabouts? I should mention that one of the groups, the same people that advocate for this type of community development format were instrumental in introducing roundabouts into the lexicon of traffic engineers in this country. So almost all of us are very familiar with roundabouts as a traffic control device. Roundabouts are great for, without getting too technical, roundabouts are typically referred to as traffic control device because it's a means of moderating movements between vehicles in a vehicular circulation. The fact that they slow traffic is incidental to that. I've done a lot of work in the UK. They literally will paint a 1 meter circle in the middle of an intersection. And that tells you that you yield to the car coming from, in England, I think it's from the left. And, but there's, you know, I went right through one of those one day, and the guy sitting next to me, you know, you just ran through a roundabout. I said, really? It was literally a painted circle. So it is an instruction to the driver. And if you're English, you would know that that round circle means that you yield to traffic coming from the left. I'm sorry, from the right, I think it is. No, right, thank you. I haven't been over there in a while. So roundabouts, they're very useful for keeping cars moving, actually, but at a slow pace. There are other traffic control devices that are just as effective, but also more accommodating of pedestrians. One is four-way stop signs. And there's a couple different issues related to speed and through traffic. One is how the road is designed, and typically the wider the road is designed and the less visual clues that are provided to the driver that they are in a pedestrian precinct, the more encouraged they are to drive fast, regardless of what the posted speed limit is. So that's why when we talked about that in the first presentation, we recommend small, narrow, local roads to encourage traffic to drive slowly, because when the driver feels like it's appropriate to go more slowly based on the circumstances of how the road is detailed and designed, they will do that. A roundabout will do that in a rather blunt way, but it actually doesn't stop the cars. So if you have pedestrians in a roundabout intersection, it can be very confusing, very hard to protect the pedestrian. The other way we do it is, as you said, to sort of break the road up into smaller segments. Also, four-way stop signs do that. Concerns about through traffic is you just make it inconvenient enough to go through the neighborhood that the drivers going to other destinations will just avoid going through it, just like they do now. But there's a whole science to that. And we have people who work on our projects who work with us to ensure that that issue is very adequately addressed. Well, it's a level of detail that exists. I don't know that we will be able to specifically document, but we can certainly direct you. There was a slide in the opening sequence about complete streets. There are whole websites dedicated to this. So, and a lot of documentation. Well, again, at the level of resolution that we're working at, we're now, are we 48 hours into this so far? Okay, we're 48 hours into this so far. So when we draw these streets, we are drawing them with the assumption that all of those technical issues will be addressed in the final plan and the actual technical documents for the construction of the site, because that's how we do it in all of our projects. But for right now, we start with the big picture and we work down to that level.
Could you throw in that hypothetical that was the second from last? And then I'll be quiet for a minute.
Yeah, I just want to make sure other people have an opportunity to ask questions too. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry.
What I wanted to point there.
Right.
What I wanted to point out to the people who were here for the first time is that, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
my interpretation of these is that they are back mount.
They're alley-loaded parking. That's why you would normally have those. And they can also put services on there like garbage and utilities. So there's an
These are alleys and they service both houses.
That's correct. And again, this is an illustrative plan based on the general conditions in that neighborhood format. Okay. Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure other people have chances to ask questions as well too. Yes, sir.
You used the term walkable.
Yes.
Both in your slide presentation and in your verbiage. If I were to move into one of these properties, what percent of my weekly needs would I be able to fulfill in that community in walkable?
Sure. Well, again, it depends on the community and depends on where you live within that community. I'm sorry. The question was, thank you. Question was, if you lived in a walkable community, how close would you be able to walk to get?
Am I going to be able to cover 50% of my needs in a week, or am I going to cover 5%?
Okay. One of the examples I presented in an earlier presentation we talked about Kentlands, for instance, and we talked about it briefly. You can buy anything that you could conceivably need in a year in Kentlands, and you could walk there from your front door. Now, not everybody does, but you could, depending upon where you live in the neighborhood. That has a much, it's in the middle of a much bigger consumer market than Jamestown, but it was also one of the goals and objectives of the original developer of Kentlands to have a significant retail component in it. And as Kentlands has become an increasingly affluent community, because when it came out of the ground, it was price competitive with other suburban communities being built at that time. They now have a Whole Foods, they have retailers that they couldn't have conceived of having 30 years ago. So that is a relatively large walkable community in a relatively mature regional setting with a developer. And at the time when it was developed originally, there wasn't a lot of retail in that particular location, so they took advantage of that and built a fairly large retail component. Now, there's a lot of other smaller communities and/or smaller consumer markets where it's more convenience-oriented. So that would be, again, your sort of proverbial loaf of bread and gallon of milk. That is usually available in almost every community of this type that we build. And again, if that commercial component is within your neighborhood, it's within a 5-minute walk of your front house. But the thing that's probably the most important about that is that if you can get to it in your neighborhood, you can drive to it even if it's not, for whatever reason, it's not comfortable for you to, you're located a little bit outside of that 5-minute radius. You're still doing it completely on local roads within your community. But it's very doable. Right. Well, that is the preference that has been expressed by the community. Exactly. Now, you could do a retail demand analysis, which is what is called a gap analysis, which would look at how many dollars are leaving Jamestown to purchase goods and services outside of Jamestown, and then see if you want to capture it. And I believe that happened just up there. What's the name of it? Grandover Station? What's the commercial we were talking about? Grandover Village. Yeah, because those were consumer dollars that were leaving Jamestown. And because that was built inside Jamestown, that's a major source of tax revenue for the community. But up until that was built, all of those consumer dollars and all the jobs related with those consumer dollars were leaving the community. But that's probably filled that larger need. So I think the idea of doing more neighborhood-serving retail here, it makes perfect sense. By the way, it's kind of funny because we were having that conversation about mixed use the other night too. And I was thinking, you know, there's a lot of different kinds of mixed use, but normally when I talk about it, I talk about vertical mixed use where you're mixing uses in a building, but I also talk about horizontal mixed use where you can access different needs, you know, basically within walking distance. And I thought my personal definition of mixed use is that if I can get lunch within a 5-minute walk of either my place of business or where I live, that's by without fear of being run over. That's the caveat. That's mixed use. And so we went to lunch across the street today, and because I thought your downtown is a perfect example of mixed use until I tried to cross the street out here. So we had to. That's where that little caveat comes in. But the timing of that signal is so biased for the through traffic. You guys really need to have a conversation with your traffic engineers because that is the most pedestrian unfriendly crossing I think I've encountered anywhere. But it does keep you in shape, I will say that, because it does encourage you to cross quickly. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, the question was how many, this is a conceptual design, but how many households are being planned for this? We're not planning how many households. We're laying out a illustrative plan of a neighborhood-based community on this property. As I mentioned previously, density is something that can be ratcheted up and down depending upon what the market will support and also, again, the preferences of the community. We have illustrated it here based on what we think would be appropriate based on the input that we've heard. Now, this is all assuming basically mostly single-family detached houses on a variety of different lot sizes. So once we have a final plan, we can actually go through and document what that, we call it a yield analysis, what that would yield in terms of the number of units. But then you can also go up, but all the things that we're talking about and have been envisioning related to this process has all been relatively low density, single-family detached, single-family attached, and a very limited amount of multi-unit buildings in the form of the mansion flats. And again, there was some support for that and also some not support for that, no apartments of any kind. So but those would fit on a large lot, single-family house lot. So there is some flexibility there in terms of the yield count. Yes, ma'am. Well, that's a great question, and we should have put that on the survey for tonight. Oh, I'm sorry. Where was the location for the schools? Do you guys maybe want to come up and talk to the plan about some options for the schools? Your plans? Yeah. Sure. Well, they're on the. Well, I was going to do them here because we got the two plans, and if you think that's kind of easier for you.
I think the logical, a school is a great opportunity.
Oh, sorry.
I think the schools are great opportunities to anchor some of these neighborhood centers. So they could kind of provide an identity for one of these sub-neighborhoods within. You know, probably it wouldn't be located right on the corner here because if there is going to be, you know, a small amount of neighborhood serving retail, might want to be away from that. But, you know, something around one of these centers. We have a kind of public building located here, which has a kind of ample amount of green space behind it. That could be a good opportunity if the community thinks that it needs another school.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Generally speaking, it's just like anything else. You put you locate the school where the demand is the greatest. So we would normally, that would mean towards the neighborhood center typically, but it could be on the edge because if it would be serving the whole community. But so it would really be where it would be accessible, most accessible to the most number of students. And that early diagram about sort of the safe path to school, walk to school. So kind of, it's a little bit of a balancing act, but if it really is a neighborhood school and you're not, you know, bringing people in from outside of the community, then you can nestle it pretty much anywhere in the neighborhood. And the nice thing about this type of design, again, is you can have something like that could be a park, but it could also be a future school site or a civic site for some other use. So we can identify those sites in the plan, and we'd be happy to do that for the final plan, and identify those special sites for civic use, whether it be, for a school, a ball field, or something like that. And then, or maybe even, again, in another 10 years, an assisted living facility might be back on the table. Who knows? But the point is, the plan has the ability to, that has that kind of flexibility. So if you have a site that's well suited for a more community-oriented use, we can identify that on the plan, and then, as the community builds out, you can decide what's the best use for it. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear the question. No. And you can code that out very, very easily. So, I'm sorry, the question was, it's not for a convenience store or gas station, and we said that certainly would not be our recommendation. And you can actually code it out very easily so that it just becomes a non-permitted use. So. We did have a little bit, but mostly really, I mean, the idea that it would be a place where residents in the community, not unlike, what we have here, that would feel very comfortable getting together as socialize or just a neighborhood gathering place. And potentially also, for the daily needs type, convenience type goods. Any other questions? Wow. That's first. We do have a survey. I don't know if you guys got the handout for that. So we are still working. So we're continuing to refine, and we're continuing to add additional exhibits to help explain exactly what the community will look like, just continue to add additional resolution and address issues like the issues of the streets and things like that. Those are things, by the way, we do normally do street sections as part of this, and whether we get to it this week, we will do it as part of the final package, which will include a code for the community for the development agreement. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of design or concepts, did you guys, when you've been learning about history or the site, is there any do you have any creativity or any concepts behind what you would want to name it, or any?
That's an interesting. Well, Kentlands was named after the Kent Farm. I'm sorry. Any history of the site that would might lend a name to the community, and if we had any creative thoughts on that regard. There's Vermilion was. I mean, some of the projects that we worked on. What's the one in Beaufort, Habersham? Kentlands was Kent Farm before. We did a project, the one that's was Crothers a farm, or was it a crossroads, a little rural hamlet? Crothers. It was a historical name associated with. Yeah, I think so. So it's often we have Cheshire Village in Black Mountain. It's either usually a historical name associated with the property or something.
You already had a name before, but
Yeah.
I was wondering.
I mean, it's a great question, and I'm sure because this plan is really starting to recognize the property as a unique place, and not just from a historical point of view, but obviously in terms of its own natural intrinsic features. So something that kind of honored and reminded people of what it had been and can continue to be, I think is a great idea. And a lot of our projects do get named that way. Good question. Yes. Yes, sir.
On the other side of Towers, did that property go across the street? Just repeat it.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually hear the question.
The property across the street on Gilbert Towers,
Yes.
that's not addressed in the plan. What's the plan?
Good question. We've been sort of focusing on, obviously, the part of the plan that most everybody's been focused on. That site has some issues too from a developability point of view. But I think some of the things that had been looked at that previously related to some of the existing land uses adjacent to it. I think there may have been some discussion about some institutional use related to those land uses. I mean, it could be just like this. It could be a pocket, sort of a standalone pocket neighborhood, or help to kind of reconnect the two sides. But I think, are we intending to? I think we did. One of the earlier plans actually had a plan for that upper corner up there. Yeah. Well, there's a utility easement that goes through here, but I think there is some. I'm sorry. Right. Right here. Right. No, I understand. I think they were talking about this site down here. There's a road that comes through here. Yes, ma'am. I understand. But I think I think there's access from this side that was looked at previously.
Unless you're speaking of a different place. Oh, that part out, okay.
Yeah, this is a little bit out of register. Sorry, let me fix this. That's part of the confusion. Sorry. There's a access to Guilford College Road right here, and I think there was some discussion about accessing this in relationship to some of the existing land uses in this area right here. No, not at all. That's what I'm saying. This is a not developable. That's a utility easement. We understand that. Sure. This road over here. Yes, ma'am.
Are you studying the traffic and how are you going to have entrances to this new neighborhood? Are you guys going to be putting this into your plans?
Well, we have right now a proposed intersection at the existing intersection of Guilford Road and Guilford College because yeah, and it's a signalized intersection. So state DOT would pretty much, if we did any access in that area, they would mandate that. Yeah. Well, in the earlier question about how the design of the road tells the driver that's posted at 45, but it's designed for a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, so that's what everybody drives. So traffic engineers have a term called friction, and intersections will introduce friction which will encourage drivers to slow down, but also can create a more hazardous condition. So there's a lot of different techniques, but that's a whole science unto itself. But that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to build a neighborhood adjacent to that type of a roadway. Yeah. Well, actually, it's a great point because we talked about when you have that kind of a road structure, it forces all the traffic on that one road. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, yes. A question?
Just real quick.
Yeah.
So if I'm reading it right, map number 1 right here closest to you is A.
Yes, this was A. Sorry, it came off.
And the one to the far right is the
Is the combined plan. That is correct, and that's what's on the screen. And I will say normally in a more typical process, we would probably have solicited specific input related to different aspects of both plans to help inform that. But I think at this point, we've got a pretty good understanding of what the community is looking for. So we sort of kind of made that judgment call. But if there's anything that you think, that you liked on one of these two plans that you don't see on the combined plan, certainly let us know and we'll try to incorporate that into it, certainly. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
To the group about the history of that property?
Yes.
So much has been written about Clarence Mackey and has been written about other things that have happened on the property. The Armstrong family moved there around 1900. The first documents between Mackey and Ned Armstrong, who raised his family there, the Armstrongs have, or descendants of the Armstrongs have lived on that property continuously
Okay, and so just for the mic, so it was the Armstrong family, and there's going to be a history of the family and the farm coming up on television. Yeah. Gotcha. Oh, in the local paper. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, it might be national news. Yes. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. We're going to continue to be working on this. We'll be here tomorrow if anybody wants to stop by. And it looks like Dave would like to say a few words.
1 to 3, these guys, I would say there was 5 of them that went across the street to, and there's only 4 that came back. The bear got the slowest one. So tomorrow from 1 to 3, they're going to be working like they're here all day. The reason they went out for lunch is they had to get out of here because they were getting claustrophobia. But so I think if you drop in, you can see them at work taking these ideas and concepts and translating them into the plan. And they've only been here 48 hours, and they've learned a heck of a lot about Jamestown. And then Saturday from 3 to 6, I hate to say my team, might get beat during that time period in football. I don't know if I should come to this, probably to keep me from watching the massacre. But from 3 to 6 is going to be the final presentation. And then even after that, we're going to have some additional things, that are going to be done. And so I would say on your way out, if you would take your sheets and put them on the chair as you go out, we take this information and go ahead and do that. And Seth, if Seth, do you have any final words? Okay. Okay. Okay.